we'll take a few minutes, and that'll kind of help me cater what I'll focus a little bit more on in this presentation, where we'll spend more time than others. Meantime, I'll cover a little bit of terminology that we're going to talk about here, just in case I'm saying things partway through the presentation and people aren't real sure what that is. So as Kathy was introducing me, assistive technology specialist and assistive technology professional is my role. And that's just not really, you know, when I fill out any paperwork that asks what my job is, what my employment is, I never have an option for assistive technology. And people just don't tend to know what that is. And it's also misleading because of the word technology. So assistive technology is any device basically that can help, have some poll results here, that can increase, maintain, or improve functional capabilities of an individual with a disability. So as I'm looking at the audience here, it looks like I have nobody that is identifying as a person with a disability. So I would like to kind of elaborate on what that means. I'm not sure if everybody can see what the results are, but older adult, caregiver, other, maybe we've got some care professionals as well. So, you know, that terminology is swayed a little bit. You know, really it's helping anybody overcome barriers. And that's our role in our independent living center, is helping people maintain an independent life in whatever form that means. So utilizing technology or devices in any form to help overcome barriers. Virtual assistant is something we're going to talk about. Also called artificial intelligence. Our digital assistants are these electronic devices that can provide something similar to what a real life assistant may do. Examples of that you may have heard of are the Alexa, the Amazon Alexa, Siri. And as I'm saying that, I have these devices going off in the background, so ignore those things that you might be hearing there. That are obviously triggered by the names, Google Assistant, Microsoft Cortana. So what is a smart home? You know, the title of this, what does this all mean, and how is this going to be beneficial to me at all? Smart home is a universal term in the insurance industry. It used to be called environmental control units, which would allow people to access things in their home through some of these electronic devices. They can increase our independence. There's some other terminology, but I don't want to get too tied up into that. Smart home is generally what I'm going to refer to this as. Trying to look at some of my other poll questions here so I can make sure we trigger those at the right time. Universal design. So this is the you know, a big theory that we use that kind of tries to separate, you know, these things that are created specifically for an older adult or specifically for a person with a disability, and creating a universal environment that's easy for everybody to use and can benefit certain folks that have certain barriers. You know, an example I've seen, and I should have included in here, is kind of a neat little cartoon of winter, as we all know is coming and have seen already this morning in some areas. But there's a person shoveling, so it's in front of a school, and there's some students lined up on the sidewalk, and there's steps and there's a ramp, and there's somebody shoveling the steps, and all these kids are waiting to not go up and trek through the snow. And one of the students says, you know, why don't we shovel the ramp first, because we can all use the ramp. If you're going to shovel the stairs first, half of us are going to have to wait until you get to the ramp. So it's this concept of, you know, why don't we focus on the ramp? Why do we even need the stairs? Can we create you know, this environment where things are accessible for everybody and can benefit certain people that have different needs? So that we've talked about kind of some of that terminology, my next poll question I think will fit in, and I haven't done a lot of these poll questions, so bear with me. I think that they're really neat and beneficial. Could we fire up the second one, Brent? And I'd like to kind of get a gauge of, that now that we've explained what that is, some of you may know what smart home devices are, or I do have the option of I still don't know what that is, and we'll explain a little bit more and give more examples as we get into it here a little bit more. Um, so the next slide that we're seeing here is the Jetsons, and eh, eh, for those of you that are familiar with this cartoon, it's eerie how well some of these concepts from years and years ago kind of relate to some of what this smart home technology is. The use of robots, smartwatches, video calls, voice activation, flat TVs, pill camera, and I'm seeing the poll results are coming up now. So it looks like the majority of the people, 70% of the folks, do have smart devices in your home. So that's great. Um, my goal knowing that is maybe to expose you to more smart devices that may be beneficial. And the other thing I see is a lot of folks have smart devices in their house, but they maybe don't really know how to use them or don't know how to maximize their potential. So that's great. I'm glad. And, every time I do this type of presentation, there's more and more folks that have that type of equipment in their home. So kind of doesn't surprise me, but hopefully everybody's still able to kind of learn a few things. And Kathy, we didn't mention in the beginning, but we talked about I want to let people know that they do have the ability afterwards to stick around as well, to have a little bit of engagement. Hopefully we can do that. Everybody can kind of get unmuted and interact a little bit, or we can set up time for some of you folks to speak with me individually as well. So
Sure. Calvin, I'd just like to say to everyone else who is out there, um, if you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat box. I'll be monitoring that. We'll answer those questions toward the end. But again, we will unmute everyone, and you'll have that option to, stay after and have that conversation. Thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah, and I encourage people to do that if they're able to. This is one of the big downfalls, I think, of presenting in this platform is I don't have the interaction, and I'm not the type of speaker that likes to sit up in front of a room and talk for a period of time and not have any interaction. I think it's really neat. Oftentimes the audience brings up points and brings up ideas that they've used and brings up different things that I wouldn't have even thought to include in this, and we can all learn from each other. And I always have, as I'm reaching over to my side here, my little note-taking device, and I'm learning. So that would be a neat opportunity afterwards for us to be able to kind of engage, interact, and I'm willing to bet that people are going to be able to learn a few things from that portion as well if you're able to stick around for that. If not, I encourage you to reach out, get in touch with me, and we can kick around some of those ideas. All right, so we talked about all this stuff, and now how can it help me? So what can a virtual assistant do? Again, if we're not clear on what that virtual assistant idea is and the concept, it's really simple. In some of these examples that I'll kind of read through here shortly, it's really not too much different than what a live in-person assistant can do. So, think in the business world, or if you've got an aide at home, somebody that can do different things for you that maybe are difficult for you, maybe you're not able to do independently, um, or maybe you can do independently but are difficult. And we talk a little bit about the concept of energy conservation as well. How much time do you want to be spending completing some of these tasks? Is doing the task itself providing any value to you in your life? And I'm not trying to insinuate that the answer to that is yes or no. Sometimes the idea of, for example, opening blinds. Um, it can be very difficult for somebody to get up from a seated position, get across the room, lean over a couch, which may be a safety hazard, a trip hazard, um, open, twist a little dowel, which might be difficult to do, or slide something that might be difficult to do if you've got arthritis. Um, all of those are things taking place just so that you can have the blinds open so you can let a little bit of sunlight in the house. So what's the value in that process? Is that a form of exercise for you? And for a lot of folks, it is. For a lot of people, they don't want some of this technology in that instance because that is their regular exercise. They don't have the ability to get out in wintertime because of slip hazards. So doing those household chores is their exercise. So again, I'm not trying to take that away from certain folks, but I want people to think about, is there a value add in that process? Or do we want to use a voice activation or pushing a remote control or using a device in your seated position, benefiting from having that window open? And now we're able to actually do with that sunlight, whatever it is that we wanted to do, read a book or knit or whatever that hobby is. So there's things for you to think about yourself is where are you gaining value? Where do you want to be utilizing your energy? We talk about a bucket of energy each day, a bucket of golf balls, perhaps, which represent your energy. Getting up, going over, opening those blinds, that might take 3 of your 20 golf balls out of your bucket for the day. Getting dressed in the morning, that maybe doesn't add any value to you. It's just something that has to be done. Or for others, maybe it does. Maybe that's your exercise, it's bending, it's stretching, it's doing, fine motor skills, you're doing buttons. So for everybody, that's a little bit different. So I encourage you to kind of think about some of these things and whether it may or may not be helpful. I'm not going to try and insinuate that all of these things are really great and everybody should implement them. And that's where I like to meet with people individually and determine where it can be helpful. So these virtual assistants, we can use them for dictating. We can be typing, we can read text messages, we can interact with emails, we can get access to phone numbers. Scheduling is a good example. And we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about some of these as we get into the presentation. Appointment reminders, we all have these doctor's appointments. Sometimes it's difficult to remember them. Sometimes it's difficult to manage them. Maybe that's something that our aide or our family member is helping do for us, is writing down, after we get off the phone, writing down that doctor's appointment that you just scheduled for December. And then being aware, and reminded of that appointment 2 days prior, and then I need to know about it tomorrow as well. Placing phone calls, and then, obviously controlling the devices in your home. Brent, can we fire up that third poll question, please? So now that we've talked about kind of some of these things, and we'll get a little bit more in depth, I'd like to hear, why you think these types of devices might be beneficial. Or for the 70% of you that have them in your home already, I'd like to hear, why. So are you using it in the form that we talked about? Are you trying to access equipment that you wouldn't be able to otherwise utilize? Is this an energy conservation idea that we talked about? Some people just like technology. I'm a techie. I have some of this stuff for no reason other than because I think this technology stuff is cool to impress the kids. Was this a gift? Did somebody give this thing to you? You have no idea what it's for. Or on the flip side, did you see a commercial and you've got the grandkids coming for Thanksgiving, maybe in a socially distanced way, and you think that, they'd be impressed by how high tech you are, or other. And if, I don't know if we have the ability to type anything in there, but that's fine. Other is sufficient. So I'm going to go ahead and check my response here. And then we're going to kind of roll into more specific examples of some of this stuff. So what can be controlled in my home utilizing this? And the possibilities here are endless. And I'm just going to give a bunch of ideas and hopefully trigger some, spark some ideas for some of you folks. And really this is just coming down to like anything that's electronic at this point. There's so many devices that are electronic. Poll results came up here. Cool, awesome. I'm hearing 42% are using this kind of stuff to access things they wouldn't be able to otherwise operate. I'm surprised by that response. That's wonderful. We have a few techies in here. I'm also surprised by that. So that's cool. This poll is so much fun, Kathy. I appreciate you doing this. So again, maybe 70% of you are aware of one or two of these ideas, but maybe we can expose some additional ideas. Things that we can control, your TV, your lights, your outlets. So those are, lights and outlets were like the first things that all of this gave us exposure to different things. And this is really branched out to blinds. I've got voice controlled blinds in our model showcase home. Doorbell cameras for various different monitoring, either home surveillance, self-surveillance, or helping keep an eye on a loved one. Doors, to be able to open and close doors by a push of a button or voice activation, to be able to lock and unlock, to be able to allow people in and out of the home and have the home secured at other times. Garage door, telecommunications. Again, I'm going to break into all of these. The rest of the slide is kind of detailed of all of these portions. Temperature control, Most infrared controlled devices, so that's going to bounce back to things that might be controlled, like your TV remote that has the little light bulb looking thing on the end. That's your infrared transmitter. So most of those devices can now be controlled by voice activation with the use of a hub as well. Alarms and sensors, vacuum, lawnmower, pet feeders. What's required? We'll kind of just breeze through this part. The device itself, we need a device to give the voice commands to, and then internet. And this is an area that we're running into issues for some folks, and maybe this isn't a great fit for some. Some of these devices will work without internet, but I will say most of them do require internet in the home, wireless internet. I'm finding more and more people have that already anyways, maybe bundled with a cable TV service or something like that. But that's one of the important questions up front that helps us determine whether or not this is a good fit. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of these specific categories, TV being the first one. I think this is becoming a little bit more well known. I think people are more aware of these types of devices because more and more TVs now are implementing this natively, where you can do things with voice activation. And I think at this point, what I'd like to focus mostly on is be careful with marketing. Be careful with what you're seeing when you go into the electronic store. Um, if that's something that's being promoted to you. And the reason I say that, it kind of falls under this right side column with the features. If this is something that you need, be sure that you're understanding the level of hands-free or voice activation that that device is going to provide. I myself experienced many cases where these electronic sales retailers are selling and promoting TVs that are voice activated and giving us the impression that we can fully control them from our couch, or somewhere that we can't physically get up to be able to get to a remote or be able to interact with these things. Or maybe you've got low vision and you can't see the TV remote, so you're using voice. Um, for some people, you might have the ability to push a button to activate the voice activation, but a lot of these devices, you still need to be able to find the remote, get to it, and press a button to trigger that. It's not listening to you until you do that action. So if I've got a consumer I'm working with that has limited mobility or arthritis, or it's difficult to get that thing in hand and push that, the voice activation features are completely irrelevant and useless to you. So for those of you that do have the ability to do somewhat interaction with that, or maybe we can put a bump on that one button that you need to trigger that voice activation. I'm not suggesting again that that's not, might not be an option for some of you, but make sure you understand what it is you're getting before you go out and purchase something like a large, expensive TV set that is being promoted as hands-free voice interaction. So some of the devices that I work with, primarily this Logitech Harmony Hub, and again, I'll say we don't sell anything. I'm not promoting anything. I hesitate putting particular brands and specific devices in these presentations. I don't want anybody to think I promote it. We're a non-biased agency, we're a nonprofit, but there does tend to be devices that I use more often per consumer requests, or that I've had really good luck with, and I do feel comfortable sharing, the experiences I've had over the past 10 years with some of these devices. So the Harmony Hub is a device that I am able to completely hands-free turn the TV off and on. I can turn the TV channel up and down. I can turn on a different channel by name. So I can say, turn on ESPN. I can say, turn on channel 363. I can turn the volume up and down, or I can mute the TV. So there's all sorts of those things I can do without ever having to interact with a remote control physically at all. As we're all starting to get a little bit more familiar with streaming things and Netflix and all those types of things as well, we can be giving voice commands as well to find a certain movie that you want to watch, and be able to skip ahead or go backwards or pause or play. Lights. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, but there's all sorts of different ways that we can control lights. So when I'm in home working with a consumer, or virtually at this point working with a consumer, we try to find out what it is, what types of lights you're trying to utilize. Is this a dining room where you've got a fixture that has 6 light bulbs? Are we talking about a living room where you've got multiple different fixtures that are operated by a single switch? Are we talking about a lamp? An individual lamp. So what sort of a light source are we using? Are we talking about like an entire basement where you flip one switch and you've got a bunch of fluorescent lights coming on to light up the whole basement? So there's different applications for each of that. We have smart bulbs. We have a bulb socket. So you would put the socket into your existing fixture that would control a standard bulb. We have entire fixtures, LED fixtures that are meant to last 30 plus years, which tends to be the trend anyways. Or we can do switches. So if we've got something like a completely already set up, we've got all our light fixtures in the basement. There are a bunch of expensive fluorescent style lights, and it would cost a lot to replace it all with smart features. Let's put a $60 light switch in there, and it's one device that we can now do voice access to control all those older light fixtures. Is this a three-way light? I've seen that in homes that takes different equipment than a standard light switch. Outlets, so if we have a lamp, we've got a couple of choices, and they're all different logic. So light bulbs might cost $15. An outlet might cost you $45, but gives you the ability to control two different electronic devices. And then you would name them differently so that, again, with your voice, without having to get up, you can turn on the reading lamp next to you and you can turn off the light in the other room that you forgot to turn off before. And then features, we can make them dimmable. We can put timers and schedules. We can have things come on before we get home so that our home is safe. It's not a great idea. I think we'll all agree to walk around a dark home. If that's because we're getting home late in the evening, or maybe, at this point in the fall, it's not that late in the evening because it gets dark so darn early. But let's try to have some lights on when we get home so we can safely navigate to where we need to. Or if we get up to use the restroom in the middle of the night, why don't we have a light come on that doesn't need to stay on and bother our sleep patterns, but it might go off via voice or motion detection or those type of things.
Calvin,
Yes.
can I ask, when people meet with you virtually or once the pandemic is done in person, these are the type of things that you would meet in
Yep.
their home and go over what their requests or what they're looking for, and then you would give them ideas of where they can go to get those type of things?
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And thank you for pointing that out. I maybe I should have spent a little bit more time with kind of what my role is with some of this. So we provide this service for consumers directly at no cost. So my position is funded through the Assistive Technology program in Wisconsin to help people access this type of stuff that they may or may not know anything about or how to utilize. So, my biggest role with some of this stuff is helping people determine what may be beneficial for them, kind of where to start, and what they need before they get started. So in a pre-COVID world, I would come into the home, I would sit down with you, kind of find out what your goals are, what your struggles are, maybe observe part of your day, and try to make some of my own recommendations that you may not even think of on your own. And then we put together a list of, I think this might be helpful for you. What do you think? We take a look at what our cost options are, and then I direct you to where you might be able to find some of this stuff. You would purchase it, and then I can help you get these things implemented. I say implemented because I'm not an installer. I'm not really allowed to be spending my time doing the electronics, but most of the stuff is plug and play, meaning it's an outlet or it's a light bulb. It's not taking any wiring. We're not cutting holes in your wall to put these devices in. So I'm helping you implement these, get them programmed. Technology is scary, is overwhelming for a lot of people, and they don't consider it for that option. So, I like to think that I can get people past all of that setup and installation. So you're really just to the point where you're just having to do that voice activation that I've helped you understand and learn how you need to do so that you're just able to give a voice command and open your blind. And if there's some installation needed, I can kind of point you to who it is, if that's a handyman or an electrician or who it might be that would be best suited to help you get that. So that my goal is to help you overcome your barrier and utilize some of these devices.
And people who are in need, do you have that ability to point out resources, say other nonprofits or charities who might help people who are in need who can't afford the technology?
We do. So my role, I'm the technology guy. So I'm here to help assess and implement and do all of these things. There's other staff at my organization, independent living coordinators that kind of do a whole bunch of stuff. And part of what their role is as well is if we determine what your needs are and we come up with a list and we've got, $250 worth of equipment you need, you're on a tight budget, you've decided that maybe we can contribute $30 to this goal. We'll go to this independent living coordinator together and we have an application form to this to say, we need about 230 bucks. I'm going to do some justification. This is why it's needed. I've observed that this is going to be helpful, and they're going to help find the funding for us. So thankfully, I can just ask for that. You and I together ask for that. And then we've got other staff that are going to do their best to work with some of these other groups, organization, grants, collection of funds. We get a lot of we do a lot of fundraising. We get a lot of donations that are earmarked for certain purposes as well. So absolutely, making this happen is our goal. If that's determining what it is, finding what's best, getting it set up or funding it. I can't promise you that we can do it for everybody, but our goal is to help make sure that this can happen one way or another. And the biggest thing that I focus on is trying to achieve your goal for the lowest cost possible. So I'm never going to come in with the most high-tech advanced, this is so cool type of a solution for you. We're always trying to find the easiest solution first and kind of ramp our way up. So outlets, again, fairly self-explanatory. These are little boxes, devices that we're going to plug into an existing outlet. That's going to just give us two more plugs that we can plug a non-smart device into, like a lamp, for example, or any device that has a physical off-on switch we can plug into, and now we can use that smart switch as an on-off switch that we can activate with our voice. And I know I keep talking about voice activation, and I've got a slide here at the end to address some of that. I gave this same presentation to an ALS group recently, and there's obviously a lot of concerns from that group and others. I don't have a strong voice. I do have some other strong features. I can use my feet. I can use my hands, I can, press things with an elbow, but my voice isn't very strong. Or I work with spinal cord injury patients that, maybe have affected voice, and they can interact with some of these devices with ways other than their voice. So I'll address that. I'm kind of defaulting to voice activation, but there's all sorts of other ways that we can activate this from the position that we're in, other than voice as well. Examples of what we can operate on outlets: fans, lamps, radios, humidifiers. Again, these non-smart devices that we can plug into an outlet. Kitchen appliances. Some of this is reaching, some of it is not. Microwave, voice-activated microwave. That I found to be a really cool solution for somebody with vision loss, macular degeneration. We used to have a really neat microwave in our model showcase home in Green Bay for people with visual impairment. That thing gave out on us. We overuse it. We have a lot of staff that utilize these residential devices, so we burnt it out. And when it came time to replace it, I realized, all of these microwaves now have the flat plastic panels. There's, if you're a person with vision loss, it's very difficult to interact with those compared to a while back. They all had raised buttons like an old phone. So if you wanted to do it for 30 seconds, you could kind of determine, usually we all know that middle number 5 has a little bump on it, so we can find the 5. So there's something physical to interact with. A lot of these kitchen appliances now are meant to be easy to clean. They're a little bit more sanitary. So they're flat plastic screens. So if you're a person with vision loss, macular, or you wear thick glasses and it's just hard to see some of this, some of these voice activated microwaves could be a lifesaver. And the one that's on Amazon is no different cost than any other microwave in its size. So there are some benefits to this. There's smart coffee maker. I've struggled a little bit to find a really good application for that. There's ways that we can do that by voice, but we're still having to put the filter in and put the coffee grounds in. Granted, there are some that have that kind of combined together for you, but you still need to pull out the old coffee. So there's pieces of this, and that's where it's helpful for me to work with different folks and determine if we can even make one step easier, it might be worth consideration. Sous vide is a style of a cooker that we have that would possibly allow you to be able to work with a family member to create healthy meals, maybe once a week. Maybe on a weekend, you've got family that comes over. Well, the reason I point to this is, as people start to grow barriers, arthritis, difficulty standing for long periods of time, what I'm seeing happen is people are spending less time making healthy meals, even if it's somebody that loves to cook. Reading the ingredients is difficult. Doing all the mixing and all of that stuff is difficult. So a really big trend that we've all noticed is that people start to eat less healthy. They're eating instant meals, and they're eating more preservatives and a lot more garbage that can really deteriorate your health more rapidly even. Um, so we really try to focus on ways to be able to allow you to continue doing some of those things, and maybe take away some of those steps that are difficult. So again, if I'm seeing you're having a hard time with a can opener, but you can do everything else, let's find you a can opener that can do that for you. Or a sous vide is a device that maybe you've got a family that can help you cut out vegetables and meat and put it in a bag and throw it in the freezer. And then each night of the week, you can take that bag, put it in your cooker, and eat a healthy meal, and you're not having to do that on your own each day. Um, so different kitchen appliances, thermometer to be able to remotely keep an eye on things if you've got memory loss. Refrigerators, there's fancy new refrigerators now. And again, this is probably a little overboard, but will automatically maintain a grocery list for you, so that you're able to make sure that you're keeping stock of some of the items that you need in the kitchen. Virtual assistant recipes. So reading recipe books are difficult. I work with a lot of folks that want magnifiers in their kitchen just because they want to read recipes. So with these virtual assistants, we can have recipes read aloud to you. We can have recipes in a large format that we can, zoom in on your computer with a large display. I mean, imagine you've got your large computer screen in the kitchen that you can zoom in and read all of those steps, which is going to be a lot easier than your old, 6x9 cookbook that you've got that's probably faded and tiny little type. So there's different ways that can help you if that's your barrier in the kitchen. Smart garden, there's all sorts of different ways that you can maybe grow the vegetables and fruits that you want to be able to do. Some of these are able to do in the home. That's good for us here in our cold weather. Or if you're in an assisted living, or you're in an apartment where you don't have an outdoor living space, there are smart options for that as well. And I'm realizing that I need to get a move on here. So, kitchen and bath. I've given some examples. It's gotten to the point now where a lot of these big bathroom faucet companies are coming out with smart devices that we can turn off and on. We can meter water to specific amounts, so we don't need to worry about reading a measuring cup. We can control your shower temperature with voice. So if you're a person that doesn't have that temperature sensory, um, so there's all sorts of bathroom fixtures that we can control as well. Cloud services, again, I think that we're all becoming more aware of this due to, again, COVID, but grocery delivery, prior to COVID, I'm not sure if a lot of people are aware of that. And I think we've all since now seen the benefits of not having to get additional exposure. But for folks that's just a difficult task. There's groceries delivery services available. You do it all online, or you can do that with voice activation as well. Or you can set up reoccurring delivery through companies like Amazon. So if you know you need bread every 2 weeks, you just set that up as reoccurring, and it's automatically going to send it to you, because after 2 weeks, you've either used it all, or it's starting to get moldy and you got to toss it anyways. So there's some of these great things that can help you avoid doing some of those tasks. Blinds, I talked a little bit about those earlier. So there's all sorts of different ways that we can activate those blinds with voice or control devices. Doorbell, we've probably seen the Ring doorbell. That's the one that's promoted most on TV commercials. So what that does is that gives us the ability on a device that we have in hand to be able to see who's at the door. and we can determine whether or not we need to expend our energy to get across the house. Or maybe you're downstairs doing the laundry and the doorbell rings, and then we all kind of like rush up the stairs faster than we're comfortable, and now we're putting ourselves at risk of tripping or whatever to get to the doorbell just to find out, it's a political, somebody's just got a little mailer they're trying to give you to sway your vote, and you wouldn't have rushed up that quickly if you knew that that's all that was. So the ability to see who's at your door and interact with the person that's at your door. Remote lock. So if I pair this ability up to be able to lock and unlock, so say you have a difficult time getting up, you want to keep your door locked for security reasons, you've got a neighbor's coming over, or you've got a book club and you've got a few folks coming at 6 o'clock, but you don't want to just leave the door unlocked. So with this Ring doorbell, you can see who it is, you can interact with them, and then you can push a button on your phone or whatever interactive device we have, or with voice possibly, to have that door unlock, and you can tell them, "Hey, I just unlocked it. Come on in. I'm in the den." So there's all these devices that maybe we can pair up a couple of different devices to help you achieve your goal or remove some of these barriers. Remote door opener. So I have consumers that would use something like what we see in a commercial setting with the push button paddles to be able to open a door for us. They make residential versions of that. So you can have buttons in your home that will open a door for you and then close behind you and lock. They're secured. We can do that with voice activation. We can do that with buttons. So there's all sorts of different ways that we can get you in and out of your house as well. Proximity access. So if you have caregivers, you have people that are coming over, this is a very big area that I work with consumers. Most of the people I'm working with have 3 or 4 different caregivers coming on different days or more. They all potentially have physical keys to their home. So with some of these types of devices, you can give them electronic access to your home if you want them to, at the times you determine you want them coming in the home. So if you have a caregiver that's scheduled to be with you from 8 to 10, you can allow them on their phone, when they approach the door, it will automatically unlock for them when it senses that it's them through the phone, and then it's going to lock behind them. If that person comes early, we unfortunately see a lot of caregivers taking advantage of the situation where they know the person they're caring for has money in a certain area because they do the grocery shopping. That's their job. They know that that person is in bed and can't get out of bed. And if I come in at 5 o'clock in the morning before they get up, they'll never even know it was me. So that caregiver is only allowed access at the times that you provide. So between 6 and 8. So if they come at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning, they're not going to get in. That access that you've given them isn't going to allow them in. And if you have caregiver turnover, now you don't need to worry about changing the locks or getting keys to in and out of people's hands, or changing, if you've got a push button keypad, you don't need to change the combination and give that to everybody else. You just remove access for that one person and move on. So it's a security thing. More often than not, consumers I work with just leave their door unlocked, my father included, as a person with a spinal cord injury. Lived right next door to a high school. There were students that would park up and down his street. I'm not trying to stereotype against high school kids by any means, but he was a target. He was a person that would be vulnerable to somebody that maybe wanted to take advantage of his situation. He never locked his door, ever. His door was open 24/7, and I was just like, Dad, that's not okay. And the reason he did that is because he had all these different people coming in the home, and there was changeover. One caregiver couldn't make it, so the company would have to call in somebody else, and they wouldn't have a key. It was only practical for him to be able to leave the door unlocked. So, there's a lot of safety concerns that way as well that this can help alleviate. Thermostat, being able to control your temperature in your home. I think, again, I'm not going to spend much time on that, so I can get through some of this. But being able to set schedules or control via voice, if you want to be able to adjust temperature. Alarms and sensors. So, we see a lot of folks either do not have the ability to maybe to get in a basement, or it's very difficult to get into a basement and maybe don't know what's going on down there enough. And when we come into flood season or heavy rain season, we might not have any idea that we've got standing water. So they make alarms and sensors that might just tell you your sump pump's not running, you're getting a little bit of water built up, and that way you can address that kind of stuff immediately to avoid some of these. Motion alerts, driveway alerts. Again, if you're living in a rural area and you've got a long driveway, you've got concerns about who might be coming in and out, but you can be notified if somebody's here. vacuums and lawnmowers. So, smart vacuums, the Roombas as they're branded, that's old technology. You're probably all aware that that did exist, but it's cool stuff and it's really come a long way. I had one of the original devices that I kind of won in like a bet. I never would have paid what those things were going for, but it was garbage. It just didn't do anything. It had a tiny little tray. It would fill up in like 5 minutes of a clean home even, and it just didn't do a good job. And I was realizing I still had to vacuum behind it. So if taking care of the house is something that you're using energy on that you'd rather not be, some of these devices might be really beneficial. Or again, maybe you enjoy cleaning the house. Maybe that's your exercise. So maybe this doesn't make a lot of sense, but these vacuums have really come a long way and they do a much better job now than they ever have in the past. So it's something that I think has become a lot more affordable and I think works a lot better than it has and really is worth consideration if you're living in a house that's not up to your standards as far as staying clean, or if you'd rather not be focusing your time and energy on it. And the same for lawnmowers. That technology is only a couple years old now, but you're able to keep your yard maintained without having to potentially pay somebody to come in. And I just threw out some comparable figures here on what it might cost to hire somebody in versus doing it on your own. Pet care. So there's different devices that can help us maintain our pets. Some people might have a difficult time feeding, or now there's even devices that'll help clean up, the dog remnants in the yard as well, which has always been kind of a big barrier for people that may disallow them from having a pet. And then service pets as well. We're seeing more and more of that. You need to be able to show that you're able to maintain the pet. So some of those devices will help with that. Health and wellness. So, this is something I think has been triggered more so even by COVID than prior. Some of it not. Medication dispensers, is a big thing for a lot of us. How do we make sure we're remembering to take our devices? We have one staff that really specializes in just med dispensers. That's a very big part of what she does, self-feeding and med dispensers. So there's all sorts of solutions for that. If that's not something that you've worked with your physician on or the pharmacy, get in touch with us and we can help all sorts of different, from super low tech to super high tech, things that can be monitored, things that will call a family member if you haven't taken the medication, so it has a weight sensor in there. And if you don't, and maybe that's the last thing you want is family not knowing, and that naggy son or daughter on your back again because you forgot to take your pills. But on the flip side, maybe it's important, and we've also found that that's another good method. If you haven't taken 2 of your meds for that day, maybe something's wrong. So that system, that med dispenser, will call a family member and alert them that you haven't taken your meds since 9 o'clock this morning. Maybe that's a good reason for them to come check on you and make sure everything's okay, that you haven't slipped or something like that. Health monitors. So the device I've got portrayed here is something that I saw at Schneider National at their headquarters, which we're going to be probably implementing as a temperature sensor. We talk about with this COVID thing, and that's helping with early detection for things related to COVID, but also influenza, pneumonia, other things that, maybe a fever is the very first indicator. So these devices, you can just walk past them. You don't need to touch it. You don't need to do anything with it. And it's going to give you a temperature reading. You do that on a regular basis. So there's becoming neat technology ways to be able to monitor health. Blood pressure, heart rate, rhythm, these smartwatches, the Apple Watch is doing a lot of these things now and helping with early detection if you have heart issues or blood pressure. Hand wash reminders. I don't like it on mine, but my watch has started now telling me it starts a timer. It can sense when I'm washing my hand and it starts a timer and it doesn't let me quit washing my hands for 20 seconds. So, good practice of keeping ourselves clean with some of this technology. And how are we doing on time here? If Kathy, pull up the...
Calvin, we could go back that one slide. We'll go another, 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Okay. So telecommunication, I want to talk on just because it's a different part of what I do. All of these devices are going to help us stay in touch. This is an issue that we've seen like never before with COVID. But if you're finding yourself in a position where you're not able to physically interact with people and you're losing contact, let me know. There's all sorts of ways that we can address this. If it's hearing loss, if it's physical interaction, if it's you don't know how to use all this fancy Zoom and Facebook and FaceTime technology, those are things that I can do as well. And there's grant programs to help with some of this stuff, to help you stay in touch with folks. Call devices, this is something that we run into, like the Lifeline and emergency response devices, but maybe you don't want to pay for that service, or maybe you don't feel like that's necessary. Maybe you're just trying to alert somebody else in the home, but it's difficult for you to do that with your voice. So there's local alarms, there's little push buttons, similar to ringing the bell when you need help with something. But maybe your caregiver is a person with hearing loss. So we're talking about combined disabilities. And so maybe you press a button and that person, that caregiver of yours who has hearing loss, has a vibrating watch on. So you're able to alert that person, maybe this isn't relevant to your barriers. Maybe this is relevant to theirs in order to provide assistance to you. So there's all sorts of solutions for that, be it local, be it reoccurring costs, or be it simple in-house solutions. Input devices, again, this is what I talked about. If voice isn't an option for you, there's all sorts of different ways that we can do this. There's touchscreen, there's smartphones, there's tablets, there's computers, there's these, echo devices that are a computer that you can control with your voice as well if you don't know how to use a computer. There's technology called eye gaze. So I have technology in the room here with me that I can control with my eye. So on a tablet or a computer, wherever I'm looking at the computer, that's where it's going to control. And if I blink twice, I can click on it. Joysticks, switch control by pushing buttons. I had an ALS consumer with ALS that challenged me, and he couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't lift his hand. He showed me this is about the function he had left. And I had made the challenge in that support group. And I said, I bet you I can give everybody here access to an iPhone. I can give everybody here access to an iPhone, regardless of what your barrier is. I don't care if it's mobility, vision, arthritis, hearing loss. I don't care what it is. And he thought he caught me. So I went over and I said, well, show me what you got. How much strength do you have there? And he didn't have any strength. All he could really do was touch his thumb and his pointer finger together. Couldn't speak on his own. This is the ability that he had left with his progressive ALS. I developed a switch that he was able to, a contact switch. So it strapped around his thumb and it strapped around his pointer finger. All you had to do was connect the two contacts, and I could give him access with what's built into an iPhone already. It cost me, I think, $7 to build that device and a couple of hours of time and research. I was able to give him control of the iPhone. And that was probably one of the coolest things I've seen. So again, I challenge you, if you don't think that you have the ability to interact with some of this stuff, I challenge you to bring that to me, that I can't help you overcome that. I've yet to come with somebody that I don't have the ability to interact with these things, to control these smart devices. And then the rest of these, Kathy, I think kind of duplicate what you talked about. I'm going to get a copy of this to Kathy that we'll send out. So the rest of these slides are kind of talking about what we do as independent living centers. Again, my role with helping with loan and demonstration, we're trying to figure out virtual platforms for this. So right now we're not doing in-person services still per our board of directors for my health and for yours. So I'm changing our program to be able to send you devices. I can work with you virtually to observe using some of these things, and then we can adjust it and I can send you more things. Our goal is to help you try devices to come up with the right solution before you're ever spending any of your funds or before we're requesting funds from some of our other sources. So that's really, my big role here with this loan and demo. And then funding sources we talked about, and that's it if I have to skip through that end piece.
Okay, we are going to, yes, thank you, Calvin. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I realized I think I skipped those last polls, but I think that's probably okay. One of them and maybe you want to just fire it out as we're doing this, I guess, Brent. Would you consider a smart home device now that we've talked a little bit about it? And then the next one, maybe Brent, you can just fire that out after we get the responses back as we're kind of going through the rest of this Q&A portion. But it's my challenge to you. Answer my poll question here. So the next question that he'll fire out after we get our responses is my challenge to you. Do you have Is there something that you would like to see smart that isn't, that we didn't talk about? Is there a barrier that you have that, maybe we didn't address? Bring it up to me. And that's probably a better in a, in chat or in person as well. Because I want to hear those examples. And those are things that maybe I can come up with, maybe we can combine these things. So again, thank you for your time with this, and let's roll into that Q&A, Kathy. I want to make sure we give people enough time to ask their questions.
Wonderful. So we're
We
gonna
have
go into the Q&A, and first, I'm going to reiterate what you've said, that the options office is closed to in-person appointments, but Calvin is available. His contact information is in this presentation that will be emailed to you after this, after we finish. We'll also attach a survey. And as Options is a nonprofit and receives funding quite often through the information, who did they serve? What county do they live in? Think questions like that. I want to let you know that the survey, we're asking you to complete it. It will have some of those questions in it. And that again will help Options remain an independent nonprofit that can help everyone. So, question that we have is, someone would like to know, what's the best device? You have a relative who lives, say, in another state. What's the best device to monitor someone remotely? How do you do that?
Well, so that's a very controversial area. And we've kind of had to take a stance on that, and it depends on who's coming to us with that question.
Mhm.
We don't like to provide that answer to family members. Our organization, we're a consumer driven organization, meaning we're providing solutions to consumers directly. We're helping to provide individuals the ability to be safe and independent. But at the same point, we understand sometimes that means being monitored. So we try to find a happy medium on that. We want to make sure that we've got consent from the person we're doing that monitoring. And then we want to make sure we're doing that in a cautious way so that we're not infringing on their bedroom or their private areas.
Mhm.
Maybe we monitor a hallway outside their bedroom instead of their room. If we want to know when they're getting up and walking to the bathroom at night in case they slip and fall. That being said, if we get family members and consumers together that all feel like this would be in the best interest, there's all sorts of, what at the time started, I've got a 6-year-old son that I found this cool webcam as a baby monitor for, that allowed me on my phone to monitor the camera that was in his crib. So that meant anywhere I was, I could see that. And that was just because I'm techie and I'm geeky. Obviously, if I'm at the grocery store, I don't need to know what's going on at home. There's somebody else to address that. But so these IP cams, kind of as they're called, or surveillance cameras or whatever, we're using a lot of those, and those are very small. I've got one that I could show somewhere here, but
I'm
they're
hearing you
like an
say,
inch
though, that
by,
it's mutually agreeable, that's really critical for
right.
crucial.
Right. And we try to make sure that family members understand that. Again, I understand the desire for that as a family member, to make sure you're taking care of mom and dad. And I agree, observing, and making sure that they're safe helps them stay in their home longer. But it's just a really controversial area. So if we sense some tension there, it's an area that we opt not to get involved in until that's ironed out. So, but again, once everybody agrees on that, we have a coworker of mine works primarily with dementia, Alzheimer's patients, and that's a big area. We want to help them stay at home. Some of the monitoring helps ensure that. So if everybody's on board, a lot of times these IP cameras, and we're talking a cost of maybe $40 for a little camera that connects to their internet in their home, and then you're able to monitor that on your smart device. So on your phone, you can pull up a live camera, and then you can also interact with that. So you can talk to them. They can hear you, and you can talk to them. So there's all sorts of very low cost everyday items. These are not specialty devices that allow us to do that. Again,
So
with extreme caution.
that would be someone who would contact you to have that conversation with
Absolutely.
their loved ones. So
Absolutely. Yep.
wonderful. We have someone else who's asking about, are there any devices that control washers and dryers? Can you
Ooh.
make that an assistive device that would control that? I don't know if they want that to fold the laundry too, But
I'm leaning over here to make a note of that. I'm not sure that I've heard that one. So on the spot here, I may have been stumped. And again, I guess it depends on what it is that you're trying to control with that. And that's where I run into some issues with some of the smart equipment, like the coffee maker. You still need to load it. Um, you know, uh, so this is where some of our staff will help with what we call IL skills training, independent living skills training. So the solution, the smart technology is not always a device. It might not be a smart washing machine. Sometimes it's working with our staff to come up with a technique that's different than what you're doing. So, in this instance, what I would do, or a coworker, is observe while you're doing these and try to determine exactly what the barriers are that you're facing when you're trying to do your washer and dryer. Is it loading it? Is it getting the clothes in? Would a front load washer and dryer be more beneficial because you're having a hard time reaching into the top and getting all the way down to the bottom? Is a front load practical, but maybe needs to be lifted up so it's at a better height? Are you having a hard time pushing the buttons or setting the timer? Do you have arthritis that it's difficult to turn a dial? So, this is an instance where I'd like to hear more of why that's a barrier. And if you have the ability, please stick around and we can talk about that in our live talk chat thing after here, or please call me. And this is a perfect example of, because we can't do in person, what we're doing is using your device to have an in-person meeting like this where we can interact virtually. If you don't have a device, I send one to you. And we have that discussion and we figure out that solution. It might not be buying a brand new $2,000 washer that has smart features. It might be just changing some of your techniques. So I'd be very interested to hear exactly what it is. But as far as items that are dubbed as smart, I don't know that answer. I'll have to look at that after we're done here.
okay, wonderful. So we have unmuted everyone and we're going to open the floor for questions in just one moment. I'd like to remind people we're going to send a survey and the presentation, but also we'd love to invite you to join us on November 20th for our next Falls Free Friday, which will be about Tai Chi, which is often called meditation in motion, but it results in medication in motion. So it has many health benefits. So everyone is unmuted and you are welcome to verbally ask Calvin a question if you'd like.
So I allowed folks can unmute themselves, Kathy, if they want. I've connected it. So if they want, they can just unmute themselves and ask a question if they have one for Calvin.
And Brent, for folks that maybe aren't familiar with how to mute or unmute themselves, is that something we can walk them through, or maybe they can put something in the chat?
Down at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a little button that says, it looks like a little microphone. If there's not a red line through it, then that means you're unmuted. So if you just click on that, that'll allow you to unmute yourself.
And we have to have some interaction here. Somebody has to have some sort of a question.
Hi, Calvin.
Hello?
This is Julie Davids with Home Care Assistance, and I'm so excited to learn about what you do. I didn't know about it, so I'm so excited to learn about it. But could you share with us how you got interested in this line of how you got interested in doing what you're doing?
I certainly can. And I'm going to try to make this the quick version. I'm not very good at making things quick, as you can tell. So speaking for an hour is difficult. So independent living centers are required to have 50% staff and board people with disabilities. So the concept of nothing about us without us, and it's promoting, providing services by people that understand it and have lived experiences with it. That being said, I myself don't have a disability. And the reason I came into this field, my father was injured in a motorcycle accident. I touched on him a little bit earlier, but he was a spinal cord injury. So prior to this, I was doing sales, marketing, printing, advertising. It was fun stuff. KB Toys before they went into bankruptcy. I did all their marketing and worked with their advertising. Did all their printing rather. It was cool, but once they kind of went apart, I was doing other printing. After my father's accident, I realized I didn't really have a extreme passion for what I was doing, and I saw a lot of voids. The hospital that cared for him, there was a lot of opportunities. It was a newer hospital. There was a lot of missed opportunities, and our family knew nothing about spinal cord injury or disability, or even barriers for that matter. So as I was seeing needs, I kind of decided more and more that I wanted to switch my direction. I have a very high interest in technology. So I ended up kind of learning about the technology, and I started volunteering actually at Options, to helping them upgrade some of their computer systems and working with their AT person. And he had been trying to retire for a while, and he went and told the director. He said, I'm going to retire and Calvin's going to take over my position. So that's where I came into it. Is the lived experience as a family member has been great, and I don't ever try to promote that I understand what it's like to live with that spinal cord injury or a disability, but I tend to, I think that opens up people a little bit, knowing that I have some of that lived experience as a family member, that our family went through this, and I'm providing support sometimes to family members as well. So that's the shortest version I think I can give of how I got into this field. So the reason I
Well,
say
thank
50%
you.
people with disabilities is what's different for our organization to other similar organizations is, the passion we have and the motivation that we have. This isn't a paid job for us. I mean, it is, we get paid, but nobody's here for that reason. We're all doing it because we've got, some motivation that brings us to help with these kind of barriers.
Well, thank you for what you do.
Mhm. Does anyone else have a question for Calvin?
I'll speak up. I don't necessarily have a question, but kind of just a kudos for Calvin. I'm Sue Coyle with Coyle Care Management, and I had brought a client met a client to see Calvin back earlier in the year, mainly for Calvin to help us with a new tablet communication device. However, Calvin took the time to show this client around their kitchen. I never would have known that this gentleman had a really hard time opening bottles, and he drinks a lot of Coke out of bottles daily. So he saw a can opener, and something as simple as that. But Calvin just kind of was able to really pull out of him more things that he needed help with that this client would not have told me. So, when and if when it opens, even just stopping by that Options for Independent Living center, just has a wealth of resources. And of course, I'm an OTA by background, so those gadgets are kind of my fun and forte as well. But can't say enough good for Calvin and what he does. And also, I just posted in the chat, there is an Options for Independent Living center here in Appleton. Many counties have them. Calvin, I don't know if Winnebago does. Do you know?
No, so we those are two physical presences. Our Green Bay is our main model showcase home, and then we've got just remote offices in Appleton that I shouldn't say just. They've done a lot of additions there. They've got more and more of this equipment. It certainly doesn't duplicate the incredible facility that we have in Green Bay. So those are the two physical locations that we have covering our 17 counties.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, yeah, Appleton's office is not, the home model, but they do have a lot of equipment. And I've even, called John in the past and said, hey, this is what I need. Do you have anything that I can borrow and take to show to my client? And that's just been very helpful too.
Yeah, well, thank you, Sue. And I think it's nice to see you again. I think the track chair, was that what we?
Yes, and I printed those pictures and gave them to him. And yeah, he was like a kid in a candy store when you let him in that track chair.
So thank you, Sue, for pointing that out. And that just kind of, it shows the importance of, when I'm working with people, I tend to hear kind of two reoccurring things. I never knew such a thing existed, and I wish I would have known this sooner. I hear that reoccurring with almost everybody I work with. And that's neat, I think, for me, knowing that I've exposed people. It's a little disheartening, but it's also eye-opening for people to realize there's just so many things out there that you just have no idea exists. And you know, as Sue pointed out, what we got to do with her client was find all sorts of other things. And I think if I recall, Sue, this gentleman was a little bit unwilling to be open.
Yes.
What he was looking for. He was a little gruff, you know. Yeah. What I kind of hang my hat on is the ability to relate and communicate with people and kind of find out what it is that they like, what they'd like to do, you know, in a very fun, casual way. And that really helps open up more opportunities for people to determine maybe barriers that they've gotten, devices that may be beneficial that they didn't even know were barriers. You know, so often we get stuck in our routine and we don't even identify something as a barrier because we're so used to doing it this way. So spending a little bit of time with people, I can observe things and make ideas in a non-insulting way of, hey, have you ever thought about this? Or what do you think about this thing? So yeah, thank you, Sue, for pointing that out. And I appreciate.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for highlighting what Calvin is, his abilities and what he's able to do. I appreciate that, Sue. Thank you.
Well, and I think, you know, the fact that Calvin gives people hope. I mean, this guy thought he was never going to hunt or fish again. So, you know, my goal is when COVID is over, and it can happen, to get that man out fishing in that track chair, you know, and knowing that they can borrow it for a weekend, whatever. So it gives people hope too.
Yes. Calvin, we do have a question. If we could back up your presentation to the options map with the various locations. I think that was, there we go. Make that so people can see the regions that are covered.
Yeah, so are we, Kathy, are we reaching outside of kind of our local demographic here? Are we expanding? Are we running into areas outside of our coverage area? That's
a good question. Do we have anyone outside of that light blue area that's attending today who'd like to speak up?
Yeah, and if you do, you know, still please contact me. We work very closely, and what you're seeing here are the other independent living centers that serve the other counties. I'll make that warm referral. I'll call the right contact with you, depending on what it is that you need. I mean, you're certainly free to reach out to them on your own if you're able to find that information, but a various level of these services are provided. More and more of these centers are provided. We're very fortunate. I was one of 2 AT people in the state when I started 10 years ago. So there wasn't a dedicated AT person at every center. That's changed now. There generally are people that are very knowledgeable about assistive technology at most, if not all, of these centers. And if not, I'll work with the staff that they have available. You know, if logistically it makes more sense to be working with somebody in those areas. So yeah, please contact me regardless. If you're concerned you might be outside of our 17 county area, please contact me and I'll make sure to get you in touch with the right people.
Okay, wonderful. Do we have additional questions for Calvin?
Damn it.
I would like to say thank you to you. So many things that I never knew about. I am older, but I don't feel like I need any more right now than what I have. My daughters gave me the Amazon Alexa, and I don't use it. I guess somebody put a thought into my head that, you know, somebody was listening, and I'm sure that's not right, but I don't know that. I shouldn't say I'm sure. Well, I hope it isn't. But what's wonderful about it that I should be using it?
Well, that depends. And I can't really answer that for you without knowing more of, you know, what it is that you're trying to accomplish, or what, you know, what your hobbies or what your interests are. So I would encourage you to reach out. You and I can kind of explore that together. You know, do you like to read? Are you watching TV? Do you like to watch movies? Do you want to know about the stock exchange? You know, do you want updates on your email? So it really depends on what your interests are. I would never be able to list all of, you know, the benefits of these devices, and you know, I would say probably most of them aren't going to be relevant to you. So I would say that would take a little bit more time, and I would encourage you to reach out to me to to discuss that. But
Okay.
you brought up another very good point that I want to respond to, the security. And, you know, I used to have a slide in here in the longer version of at a symposium I had done is addressing that security. That's a very real concern, and you're not foolish to have that concern. You know, these are things that older generations are more concerned about, you know, that have never had this kind of stuff. Younger kids nowadays are born with this stuff in their hands, and they have absolutely no fear whatsoever of security breach on this, or having their identity taken, or, you know, having their conversations be heard. They absolutely can be. They can be hacked. I'm not trying to cause any additional fear, but I also don't want to dispel the fact that this can happen. If you have a smart lock on your house, absolutely somebody with the ability to understand technology can break into your house and open that lock. I'm not saying it's easy. You know, these companies are very high tech, but that's no different than somebody that can physically break into your house by picking your lock or smashing a window. So, you know, and that's how I like to look at this. There's always a risk, you know, with anything we do. And it's up to everybody individually to determine whether or not the benefits of this are worth that possible risk. And for a lot of folks, again, I kind of fall in the middle. So I think like 37 years old now. I kind of lose track. I kind of fall in between, I think. You know, when I started school, I didn't have a computer. So I know what life is like without a computer. I didn't grow up with a smartphone. I used to have to write. I learned cursive. I graduated high school and it was a requirement, you know, so I knew computers well. So I feel like I understand both sides of it. People that are younger than me maybe don't have any concept of reality of older adults that don't rely on that technology. So that conversation is different with everybody I have, kind of dependent on their age, you know, and what they've been exposed to. So it's a very real thing, Mary. I don't want to say you shouldn't use it for that reason, but I also don't want to say, no, it's completely, you're out of line to be worried about it. Absolutely go ahead with this stuff. That would never happen.
Thank you,
Thank you
Meryl.
very much.
Wonderful. Do we have another question for Calvin? Okay. Well, we thank you, Calvin. We thank everyone for staying on who had that ability to stay on. Again, you'll get Calvin's contact information, the presentation, and that survey that I just keep mentioning. And that will come in an email later today. So we do appreciate that you were able to attend. We hope that you'll share our Falls Free Friday concept with all of your friends and family, and continue tuning in for some education every month. Thank you.
Thank you.